This video delves into published historical sources with the aim of enlightening viewers about past events. Interpretations of these sources will be attributed to their respective historians and contemporary accounts, ensuring that no claims are presented as facts without appropriate citations. Imagine yourself standing in the dimly lit corridors of Whitehall Palace in the early hours of Traite aux Sauves, March 24, 1603. The most powerful woman in Europe, Queen Elizabeth I, has just taken her final breath. On that fateful day, the royal physicians would uncover revelations that would challenge long-standing assumptions about the Virgin Queen. Yet what makes this narrative truly captivating is that Elizabeth I did not simply depart this world with secrets. She carried within her very body evidence that could fundamentally alter our understanding of Tudor court life, the vanity of royalty, and the perilous cost of maintaining power through superficial means. What lies ahead isn't just another captivating royal tale. According to numerous contemporary accounts and modern forensic analyses, Elizabeth's remains bore shocking physical evidence that some historians assert has been deliberately hidden from official records. We are confronted with a queen whose body showcased signs of prolonged toxic exposure that extended over decades, transforming her from the celebrated beauty of her youth into a figure nearly unrecognizable from her earlier self. Before we delve deeper into these historical enigmas, if you find joy in uncovering hidden truths about past figures, I encourage you to like and subscribe for more content that explores secrets that powerful individuals wish to obscure. Please share in the comments where you're tuning in from. It's remarkable that we can explore these ancient mysteries together from various corners of the globe, united by a shared curiosity about the truths that many tried to bury. Our story begins, not with Elizabeth's death, but with a traumatic event that profoundly affected her life and ultimately contributed to her mysterious demise. In October 1562, when Elizabeth was merely 29 years old, she contracted one of the most dreaded diseases of her time. Court records from the era detail how the young queen fell gravely ill with what physicians labeled as smallpox, a disease notorious for killing approximately 30% of its victims and leaving survivors disfigured. Spanish ambassador Alvaro de la Cuadra dispatched messages indicating that Elizabeth would be hidden from public view for a significant period due to the disfigurement on her face. However, another member of the court provided a contradictory report, stating that the queen emerged with minimal visible scarring. These conflicting accounts from the same time frame strongly suggest that significant details about the true extent of Elizabeth's scarring were concealed. Historians do reach a consensus, however, regarding one outcome. Elizabeth's brush with smallpox marked the inception of her obsession with cosmetics. Records from the court indicate a dramatic increase in orders for white lead-based makeup substances that ultimately proved more lethal than the disease they were used to mask. Among the various products Elizabeth began to employ was Venetian ceruse, which according to medical historians was primarily composed of white lead. Renaissance beauty manuals, preserved in European archives, meticulously detail the preparation and application of this cosmetic, which was often applied daily and left on for extended periods, allowing the toxic lead to be absorbed directly through the skin. But Venetian ceruse was merely the beginning of Elizabeth's perilous beauty regimen. Historical evidence indicates that she also utilized a lip stain derived from cinnabar, a mineral containing mercury. This lip preparation contributed to the queen's iconic crimson mouth. Yet medical experts caution that absorption of mercury through the lips is especially rapid, allowing toxins to enter the bloodstream with alarming speed. The process for removing this cosmetic was arguably even more hazardous. Beauty treatises from the time reveal that Elizabeth employed a mixture consisting of eggshells alum and most notoriously mercury for makeup removal, which meant she was subjecting herself to mercury poisoning twice daily, once during application and once again during removal. As the years passed, numerous court observers began to note disturbing changes in Elizabeth's appearance and behavior. Reports from the Venetian ambassador in the 1570s documented a queen whose formerly white teeth had turned yellow and eventually became what was described as rotten black. Modern medical analysis correlate this progression with mercury poisoning, which is known to compromise tooth enamel and produce characteristic discoloration. Even more alarmingly, a confidential correspondence from the Earl of Essex, dated in 1599, revealed a startling discovery. He claims to have unintentionally encountered Elizabeth without her makeup and wig. His description of the sight was so jarring that historians initially dismissed it as politically motivated exaggeration. Essex depicted a completely bald woman whose skin showed severe degradation, rendering her scarcely recognizable as the queen he had loyally served. This account acquires additional believability when considered alongside other contemporary sources. Court records indicate increasingly large orders for elaborate wigs in the queen's later years, and several accounts from her ladies-in-waiting referenced her complete hair loss, often couched in diplomatic language to avoid causing offense. The toxic effects of her beauty regime extended beyond her appearance. Spanish diplomatic reports from the late 1590s described a queen whose behavior had become increasingly erratic. She suffered from what her physicians termed melancholic episodes, during which she would stare vacantly at walls for prolonged periods. Modern medical experts suggest that these symptoms align with neurological damage from both lead and mercury poisoning. Perhaps tragically, contemporary records reveal that by the end of her life, Elizabeth had lost her ability to speak. An official account by Robert Carey preserved in the National Archives detailed how the once articulate queen resorted to communicating through hand gestures in her final days, famously drawing a circle around her head to designate James VI of Scotland as her successor. Experts in the medical field note that the loss of speech is a well-documented symptom of advanced mercury poisoning, as the toxins compromise the nervous system's control over vocal muscles. The irony is profound. The woman famed for her eloquent speeches, who once inspired her nation with her oratory at Tilbury, ultimately found herself silenced by her own vanity. The days leading up to Elizabeth's death paint an unsettling picture of her physical decline. Elizabeth Southwell, one of her ladies-in-waiting, documented that the queen stood in her bedchamber for 15 hours without assistance, steadfastly refusing to lie down. Southwell recounted Elizabeth's belief that lying down would mean she would never rise again. When she finally collapsed, court records implied that her attendants had preemptively prepared cushions on the floor for this eventuality. Elizabeth remained on the floor, speechless, for 4 days before being moved to her bed. These accounts depict a woman whose body was failing her systematically, yet whose formidable will remained unbroken until her final moments. Yet the story takes an even darker turn. According to multiple historical sources, Elizabeth made an extraordinary request regarding her posthumous treatment. Unlike her predecessors, she explicitly instructed that her body should not be subjected to disembowelment, a standard royal practice for preservation. Reports suggest that Robert Cecil, one of her chief advisors, disregarded her wishes and ordered the traditional procedure to be implemented, raising concerns that an unhindered examination might reveal uncomfortable truths about the queen's health. The embalming process that followed was noted by contemporary observers to be unusually thorough. Records suggest that Elizabeth's body was treated with preservative fluids and kept under guard at Whitehall Palace for 3 weeks before her burial. Modern forensic specialists argue that this elaborate preservation effort, combined with the lead-lined coffin, may have created ideal conditions for maintaining physical evidence of her toxic exposure for posterity. This meticulous preservation takes on added significance as it occurred at a time when such detailed embalming practices were rare. The level of care allocated to Elizabeth's remains suggests that there were specific anxieties about what an intact examination might reveal, perhaps something that warranted discreet investigation by royal physicians. Eyewitness accounts of Elizabeth's funeral reveal additional layers of deception that lend credence to theories regarding her physical condition. An elaborately crafted wooden effigy was placed atop her coffin, described in John Nichol's collection of contemporary documents as so lifelike that it took the breath away from mourners. Dressed in regal robes with a crown and scepter, the effigy presented an image of a queen in full health. This extraordinary attention to the effigy further implies that those preparing the funeral were fully aware that the actual corpse was too damaged for public display. Witnesses who had observed Elizabeth for many years described stark contrasts between the effigy and the heavily made-up figure they had grown accustomed to seeing in her final days. Yet perhaps the most shocking claim concerning Elizabeth's death arises from Elizabeth Southwell's testimony regarding subsequent events post-funeral, according to her accounts, preserved in historical manuscripts. The Queen's corpse was so infused with toxic vapors that it actually exploded within the confines of her lead coffin. Southwell claimed to have heard a loud cracking sound, with the structural failure of the coffin attributed to internal pressure rupturing the wood, lead, and cloth wrappings. While historians caution against relying too heavily on Southwell's account, due to her later conversion and potential unreliability, it gains credibility when examined alongside established effects of heavy metal poisoning on decomposition. Modern forensic experts affirm that bodies with high concentrations of lead and mercury can indeed produce unusual gas buildup during decomposition, potentially causing the dramatic rupture she described. The combination of Elizabeth's resistance to standard disembowelment protocols, coupled with the primitive preservation methods of the time and the possible toxic saturation of her tissues, could have created conditions ripe for such a gruesome post-mortem occurrence. Whether this explosion actually took place is ultimately uncertain.
Ow.
But the existence of such a narrative underscores contemporary awareness that something was fundamentally amiss with the Queen's physical state. What makes these historical accounts even more compelling is how they align with modern understandings of heavy metal poisoning. The progression from cosmetic use to systemic organ failure, neurological symptoms, speech loss, and even the potential for unusual decomposition patterns all correspond to well-documented effects of chronic lead and mercury exposure. The revelations presented by modern forensic pathologists through scientific recreation are perhaps even more illuminating than historical accounts. Notably, the Royal Autopsy television series employed cutting-edge reconstruction techniques based on relevant contemporary medical records. Home Office pathologist Dr. Brett Loja identified indications of possible scrofular infections in Elizabeth's mouth, alongside significantly deteriorated teeth and what he described as dilapidated internal organs. His analysis indicates that her death was multicausal. While respiratory infection may have been the immediate trigger, Dr. Loya's assessment suggests that decades of toxic exposure created underlying complications, rendering recovery impossible. This analysis exemplifies how modern investigative techniques could potentially settle questions that have perplexed historians for centuries, if access to her remains were ever granted. This leads us to one of the most enticing aspects of Elizabeth's story, her tomb in Westminster Abbey, which has remained sealed since 1606 the year. King James I commanded that her remains be transferred to the Lady Chapel, where she now rests alongside her half-sister Mary. Abbey records confirm that this tomb has not been opened since that relocation over 400 years ago. The only glimpse of its contents came during Victorian-era explorations of the Abbey's crypts. Arthur Stanley's chronicles, stored in Westminster Abbey archives, describe discovering a coffin adorned with a carved Tudor rose and the initials A, dated 1603. He noted that the oak lid was covered in red silk velvet, much of which remained intact over the centuries, highlighting the coffin's preservation. The sophisticated lined construction of Elizabeth's coffin is especially noteworthy. Modern preservation experts surmise that this airtight environment, combined with the extensive embalming process, could have preserved not only her remains but potentially crucial forensic evidence regarding her condition. Possible DNA analysis, tissue sampling for heavy metal content, bone density examinations, and even analyses of her last meal could all be feasible with current technology. The irony is striking. The very techniques intended to honor her in death may have inadvertently secured the secrets she fought tirelessly to conceal in life. Yet access to this vital information remains forbidden, leaving historians to piece together the truth from fragmentary contemporary accounts and scientific recreations. Recent scholarship has introduced challenges to some traditional narratives surrounding Elizabeth's cosmetic use. Historians such as Anna Reel and Kate Mulby posit that evidence supporting the notion of extensive serious use may be less conclusive than previously thought. Their research indicates that Victorian historians might have exaggerated Elizabeth's cosmetic habits, drawing from broader historical accounts of Tudor extravagance rather than specific documentation of her personal practices. This scholarly debate illustrates how our comprehension of Elizabeth's life and death continues to progress. While some historians argue that respiratory illness, not cosmetic poisoning, was the primary cause of her demise, others maintain that the contemporary accounts of her physical decline are too consistent and detailed to be dismissed as embellishments of later eras. What remains unequivocally acknowledged is the enduring mystery surrounding the prohibition of her autopsy. Multiple contemporary sources indicate that Elizabeth's Lady of the Bedchamber categorically rejected any post-mortem examination of the Queen's body. This decision was unprecedented for a monarch of her significance, sparking speculation and intrigue that has fed debates for centuries. Subscribe to our channel, and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.